The rain began before dawn. Not a storm, just that soft, stubborn drizzle that seemed to whisper against the windows, as if the sky itself was grieving in secret. I woke up long before my alarm, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sound of the world mourning with me. Today was my father's funeral. The words still didn't sound real, even when I said them in my head. I had known this day was coming, but somehow it still felt wrong, like the universe had made a mistake. He wasn't supposed to go yet. He wasn't supposed to leave me alone with them. My black dress hung from the back of the door. I'd ironed it the night before, trying to keep my hands busy, trying not to think. It was simple, modest, not the kind of dress that demanded to be seen. I never wore those kinds of clothes. My sister Naomi did. She always did. I stared at my reflection for a long moment. The woman in the mirror looked composed, neat hair, pale skin, expressionless. But under that there was something hollow, something still bleeding quietly. The drive to the church was short. The rain misted against the windshield like a thin veil, making the world outside blur. Gray streets, gray sky, gray everything. I parked at the far end of the lot, where no one would notice me arriving. When I stepped into the chapel, I could already hear the laughter. Not loud, not cruel in any obvious way, but sharp enough to cut. Naomi was at the front, her voice lilting like always, too confident, too bright for a day like this. She was surrounded by people just like she always had been. Our mother stood beside her, dabbing the corner of her eyes with a silk handkerchief that matched her dress. Everything about her screamed performance, even her grief. She finally decided to show up, Naomi whispered to one of our cousins as I walked by. She didn't whisper quietly enough. I pretended not to hear, but the words clung to me anyway, like burrs in fabric. That's how it had always been with Naomi. She never had to say much. One small comment and the room tilted in her direction. They all turned to look at me, and in that instant, I could feel every judgment in their eyes. She didn't visit him. She moved away. She barely called. The distant one. They didn't know the truth. Or maybe they didn't care to. They didn't know why I left home. They didn't know what it was like growing up being the quiet one in a house where silence was treated like a flaw. But my father knew. He never said it aloud, but he understood. I sat near the back of the chapel, where the light from the stained glass poured across the wooden pews in fractured colors. The air smelled faintly of lilies and wax. I kept my eyes fixed on the casket, dark mahogany, polished to a soft gleam, a single white rose placed on top. For a few moments, I forgot the whispers. Forgot Naomi, forgot the audience. All I could see was him. The man who taught me how to fix clocks in our garage, who'd hum old songs under his breath while the seconds ticked away. The man who once told me, "Silence doesn't mean weakness, Lena. It means you're listening." That was years ago. But today, the words came back to me, echoing like the faint ticking of a clock I thought had stopped long ago. The pastor's voice carried through the chapel, solemn and practiced. I barely heard a word of it. I watched the raindrops racing each other down the windows, and thought of every moment my father had been there for me when no one else was. When the service ended, the sound of chairs scraping and murmurs filled the space. People began lining up to offer condolences. I stood aside, watching the procession of handshakes and rehearsed sympathy. Naomi hugged everyone as if she were the lead mourner in some tragic play. When she reached me, she gave me a long, theatrical sigh. "You made it," she said. "We weren't sure you'd bother." I looked at her, expression flat. "I didn't come for you," her smirk faltered. "Still bitter, huh? It's a funeral, Lena. Try not to make it about yourself." And then she was gone, sweeping back to the crowd, her voice floating behind her like perfume. I turned toward the window again, needing the distance. The rain had softened to mist now, and the sky was the color of bruised steel. I pressed my hand to the cool glass just to feel something real. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Miss Lena?" I turned. It was Mr. Harrington, my father's lawyer. A calm man in a gray suit, always neat, always quiet. I remembered him from my childhood. He'd handled my father's business affairs for decades. He held a folder in one hand. "Your father left specific instructions," he said softly. "He wanted the will to be read today." Here, while everyone is present, I blinked. "Today, is that normal?" "Not usual," he admitted. But he was insistent. He said it was important his words be heard immediately. Across the room, Naomi noticed us talking. I saw her frown, saw curiosity spark in her eyes, the kind that usually led to trouble. She strode over, heels clicking against the floor. "What's this about?" Mr. Harrington met her gaze evenly. "Your father's will. He requested it be read today." Naomi gave a light, dismissive laugh. "Well, that's unnecessary. We all know how it'll go. Mother will get the estate, I'll handle the finances, and Lena can keep whatever she's been doing with her life." She looked at me then, smiling sweetly. "We don't need a spectacle." Mr. Harrington didn't flinch. "Your father wanted it done this way." Something in his tone, respectful but firm, made everyone turn their attention toward him. Conversations quieted. Eyes began to shift in our direction. Naomi huffed. "Fine, if this is what he wanted, let's just get it over with." Mr. Harrington nodded once and gestured toward the front of the room. "If you'll all take a seat again." I followed slowly, heart thudding in my chest. I didn't know what my father had planned, but I could feel it. Something deliberate, something final. As we sat, Naomi leaned toward me, whispering, "Don't expect much. He never could say no to you, even when you didn't deserve it." I looked straight ahead, refusing to bite back. My father once told me, sometimes silence is the loudest truth. And right now, I was done explaining myself to people who only wanted me small. Mr. Harrington took his place at the front, opening a thick brown envelope. The room fell into a hush. The only sound was the faint tapping of rain against the stained glass. He cleared his throat, unfolding the papers slowly. "This," he said, "is the last will and testament of Mr. Henry Callahan." The air shifted. Even Naomi's smirk wavered. I folded my hands tightly in my lap, feeling the edge of my father's old watch, the one he'd once let me wear as a child, too big for my wrist. I had no idea that in a few minutes, that same watch, and my father's words, would silence every laugh in that room. The rustle of paper sounded louder than it should have. Everyone leaned forward slightly, breath held, eyes fixed on the lawyer at the front of the chapel. The scent of lilies had turned sharp now, almost metallic. Even the air felt heavier. Mr. Harrington adjusted his glasses, glancing down at the page. "Your father wrote this in his own handwriting. I have been instructed to read it exactly as it was written." Naomi crossed her legs, arms folded, her posture dripping with confidence. My mother dabbed her eyes again, though there were no tears left. The cousins, the uncles, the family friends, all waiting for something predictable. But my father was never predictable. "To my beloved daughters, Naomi and Lena," Mr. Harrington began, his voice steady but soft. "You were both born under the same roof, raised with the same name, yet somehow you became reflections of two entirely different worlds." One spoke loudly. The other listened deeply. "I have loved you both in ways words can never equal." A few heads tilted. Naomi smiled faintly. She always liked being mentioned first. "Naomi, you have always been certain of your own light," the letter continued. "You filled rooms, captured attention, led with fire. I hope in time you learn that leadership is not only volume, it's compassion. It's the quiet choices no one sees." Her smile wavered, just slightly. "Lena," he went on, "you carried silence like a gift. You saw things no one else noticed. When your mother and sister laughed at your smallness, I saw strength. When you walked away from the noise, I knew it wasn't rejection, it was survival. You left because you understood something most people never do. Peace is not selfish." It's sacred, my throat closed. No one breathed. The words hit the room like the sound of glass cracking, soft but irreversible. Naomi's hand twitched. I could feel her eyes on me burning, but I didn't look at her. I just sat still, hands folded, as tears threatened to blur the world. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat lightly before continuing. "To my wife, Eleanor, thank you for the years, though I hope one day you'll understand that love built on appearances is only ever half built. My wish is for you to find truth, not comfort." A faint gasp rippled through the family. My mother's jaw tightened. Her hand, still clutching the silk handkerchief, froze midair. Naomi turned toward her, her expression darkening. Mr. Harrington hesitated only a second before reading the final part. "Regarding my estate, the house, the company shares, the remaining inheritance, my decision may seem unconventional. But I believe truth must be rewarded, not noise. Therefore, I leave the Callahan estate and full control of my assets to my daughter. Lena Callahan," the words hung in the air. No one moved. For a moment, it was silent enough to hear the rain again. A soft, steady whisper against the glass. Then Naomi laughed. A short, sharp sound that shattered the quiet. "You're joking," she said. Her voice cracked with disbelief. "That's not real. That's not possible." Mr. Harrington didn't flinch. "These were your father's explicit instructions. The documents are legally binding. Witnessed, notarized, and recorded." Naomi's laughter turned brittle. No, this is ridiculous. She hasn't even been around. She left home. She barely visited. Dad told me I'd take over. Everyone knew that. I stayed silent. I couldn't speak if I tried. My pulse echoed in my ears, steady and loud like a heartbeat in an empty room. Mr. Harrington looked toward me. "He also left a letter for you, Miss Lena, a personal one." He handed me a sealed envelope, the edges soft from being handled. My name was written in my father's looping handwriting, Lena. No titles. No conditions. Just my name. Naomi snatched the will from Mr. Harrington's hands. "There's no way this is real. Mother, say something." My mother was pale, her lips pressed tight. She looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Henry must have been..." Confused. "He wasn't well." "This can't stand." Mr. Harrington shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Callahan." His cognitive evaluations were confirmed by 2 doctors. He was clear and deliberate. This was his wish. The room was buzzing now. Whispers, disbelief, judgment. I could feel the weight of their stares pressing against me, but I didn't shrink. "Not this time." Naomi stood, her voice rising. "You think you can just take everything? After all these years? You abandoned this family, and now you're going to play the victim again?" Typical Lena. Her words were sharp, venom-laced, but something inside me shifted. A calmness that didn't feel like defeat this time. I looked at her, my voice quiet but steady. "I didn't abandon anyone, Naomi. I just stopped letting you decide who I was." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I turned to Mr. Harrington. "Is there more?" He nodded gently. "Only one last line your father wrote." He adjusted his glasses, voice softening. "To anyone who wonders why, I hope they remember that love isn't proven by presence, but by truth. Lena, you were the only one who ever told me the truth. And then it was over." The paper folded back into silence. Naomi sank back into her seat, face pale with disbelief. My mother sat motionless, her expression unreadable. Around us, the whispers began again, but they sounded different now. Unsure, almost respectful. I clutched the letter in my hands, the paper trembling slightly. I wanted to open it right there, but something in me knew it wasn't the moment. Not yet, instead I stood. My chair scraped softly against the wooden floor. The sound cutting through the murmurs. "I need air," I said, my voice low. I walked out of the chapel, past the murmuring cousins and curious stares, through the heavy wooden doors that led into the rain. Outside, the world felt cleaner, cold air, wet stone, and the sound of water dripping from the church eaves. I tilted my face up toward the sky, closing my eyes as the rain kissed my skin. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Inside, I could still hear voices rising. Naomi arguing, my mother calling after me, but they sounded far away now, like echoes from a life that no longer fit. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. The ink of my name had started to blur from the raindrops. I pressed it to my chest, feeling its weight. Not in money, not in property, but in meaning. My father hadn't just given me an inheritance. He had given me a voice, and I knew standing there in the rain that what came next wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about honoring the man who finally, even in death, told the truth that everyone else refused to hear. The sky broke open again, rain falling harder now. The sound of thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance, not angry, but certain. Like a promise, behind me the chapel doors burst open. Naomi's voice sliced through the storm. "Lena, don't walk away from this conversation!" I turned slowly, meeting her glare through the curtain of rain. "I'm not walking away," I said softly. "I'm just walking forward." And for once, she had no answer. By the time I reached my car, the rain had softened again, fading to a mist that clung to the windows like breath. I sat inside engine off, just listening. The church bells had long stopped ringing. The world outside was blurred, puddles reflecting gray clouds, umbrellas moving like dark petals in the distance. In my lap lay the letter. My father's handwriting, familiar and trembling in places, but still deliberate. I traced the ink with my thumb. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Because I knew whatever was written inside wasn't just words. It was everything left unsaid between us. Every silence, every moment I thought he didn't notice me. I took a slow breath, then finally tore the envelope open. The paper inside smelled faintly of cedar and the faint scent of his cologne, that warm, steady scent that always lingered in his workshop. His handwriting filled both pages. And as I began to read, my father's voice came alive in my head. Not the stern man others saw, but the quiet one who used to hum old songs when we worked side by side. My dearest Lena, if you're reading this, I've already gone. And knowing you, you're probably reading it somewhere quiet, where the world feels too big, and your heart feels too small to hold it all. I want you to know I never meant for you to carry this family's silence alone. You were born different, and I don't mean that as a comparison. You felt the world. You saw pain others ignored, noticed things that made people uncomfortable. I saw that early on. When you were a child, you'd cry at the sound of arguments that weren't even about you. You once asked me, "Dad, why do people talk so much when they don't mean it?" I never forgot that. Your mother and sister loved the noise. They loved the stage of it all, the reputation, the wealth, the attention. But you loved truth. And truth in this family was always treated like betrayal. I had to stop reading for a moment. My throat burned. The tears came quietly, slipping down my face without sound. He had seen it all. The way Naomi would laugh when I stumbled over my words at dinner. The way Mother would change the subject when I spoke up about something real. I kept reading. When you left, I didn't stop you because I understood. You weren't running away, Lena. You were protecting the part of yourself that still believed in something good. You didn't owe anyone an apology for that. They told me you were ungrateful. They said you'd cut the family off. But I knew the truth. You just stopped fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. So, when the time came to decide what to leave behind, I thought about legacy. I thought about what matters. Money fades, houses crumble, companies change names. But character, that's the only inheritance that endures. That's why I left you everything. Because I trust you'll never treat it like power. You'll treat it like responsibility. My hands shook. The rain had stopped completely now. The silence in the car was thick, broken only by the faint hum of my own breathing. I thought of all the years I'd convinced myself I wasn't enough. All the times I'd been told I was too quiet, too hesitant, too distant. My father had been the only one who'd seen what was underneath that silence. I kept reading the final part. His handwriting was smaller now, more fragile, but the words carried the same strength he always had. One last thing, Lena, don't hate them. Not your mother. Not Naomi. They'll need more forgiveness than they deserve. And that's something only you can give, because you learned how to live without needing their approval. You once asked me what courage looked like. I didn't answer then, but now I can. Courage isn't fighting back louder. It's walking away quietly, and never letting bitterness follow you. When you walk into that house one last time, I want you to remember this. The home isn't theirs anymore. But the peace you bring there, that's the real inheritance. Take care of the people who were forgotten. The ones who worked for us. The ones who were overlooked. Restore what this family broke. I know you'll do it with grace, because that's who you've always been. All my love, Dad. By the time I reached the end, the pages were damp with tears. I pressed them to my chest, letting the weight of his words sink in. Outside, the clouds were beginning to part. A thin beam of light spilled across the windshield, warm and almost golden. For a long time, I just sat there. I thought of my father, how he'd always known how to fix things that seemed beyond repair. Maybe this was his last repair, not of a clock, but of time itself. When I finally started the car, my hands felt steadier. I wasn't driving away from the church. I was driving towards something, even if I didn't know what yet. The family house sat on the hill, the same as it always had. White pillars, perfect hedges, a garden that looked too sculpted to be alive. But when I pulled into the driveway, I didn't feel small anymore. Naomi's car was already there. Of course it was. She came out as soon as she saw me storming down the steps. Her mascara was smudged, her expression wild with anger. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped. "You think you can buy respect now? You'll never deserve what he gave you." I looked at her, really looked at her. Behind all the rage, there was fear. For the first time, I didn't meet it with silence. "I didn't take anything from you, Naomi," I said quietly. Dad just gave you a truth you weren't ready to hear. She shook her head, scoffing. You've always thought you were better than us. No, I said softly. I just stopped pretending, she froze. The words hung between us, heavier than any argument we'd ever had. For the first time, Naomi didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, trembling slightly, her eyes wet. Not with rage, but something else. Maybe realization. Maybe loss. I stepped past her and went inside. The house smelled like old wood and perfume. Every picture on the wall seemed to watch me, every polished surface reflecting the version of myself they had once dismissed. In the study, my father's chair sat empty, facing the window. The same view he'd always loved, the oak tree swaying slightly in the wind. I set his letter on the desk and placed my hand on the worn leather armrest. For the first time, I didn't feel like a stranger here. Thank you, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I knew he couldn't hear me. But maybe, in some way, he already had. The last light of day poured through the glass, catching the dust in golden motion. The house didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like a heartbeat. I turned to leave, glancing back once. It didn't look like a house anymore. It looked like closure,